Right, so if we see the cerebrum, basically this part of the brain is the main thinking part of the brain. This is also called the forebrain. So this is the main thinking part of the brain and is the site of our faculties such as learning, reasoning, intelligence, personality, memory. All these are basically closely related to high levels of thinking. Okay, so the cerebrum basically, which is the main thinking part of the brain, see, we have seen that the forebrain is made up of primarily the cerebrum. So it is the main thinking part of the brain and it is the site of all these faculties which involve learning, which involve reasoning, which involve intelligence, okay, which involve personality and which involve memory as well. So this is the part which decides our personality and to an extent it is responsible for the successes that we achieve in life. Okay, so all our thoughts, sensations and actions are controlled by the cerebrum. So whatever thoughts we are getting, whatever sensations we are getting are primarily controlled by the cerebrum. Okay, cerebrum has different areas for different functions. We will understand them. Okay, so for example we have association areas. Okay, now what are these association areas? Association areas control thinking and control thinking and memory. So these are association areas. These are things that you have to remember. Association areas are the ones which control thinking and memory. Okay, so thinking and memory go hand in hand. So let's say if you have to solve a problem in mathematics, okay, so you will have to apply certain formulas, you will have to apply certain concepts. So your thinking and your memory go hand in hand in resolving that problem. Okay, so control thinking and memory both are involved. Until unless you have a memory stock, you will not be able to solve that problem. Okay, similarly in science or whatever. Okay, so information store information and experiences. So this is basically the site where information is stored along with the experiences that we have. Okay, information received from sensory areas like eyes, ears, nose, tongue and skin. All these are sensory areas and they have stored this information. For example, if we have tasted a food, we know what it would taste like. Okay, so if by consuming the food the second time we get a different taste, then we will recognize that there are either some different ingredients which have been added or maybe the food is spoilt. Okay, so that's how the information regarding certain sights, regarding certain sounds, regarding certain smells, regarding certain tastes and regarding certain touch feelings, okay, give us sensations and feelings. Okay, for example, even if your eyes are closed and you smell a certain food which you have already consumed somewhere down the line in your life, then you will be able to recognize what type of food is getting cooked. Okay, for example, even if you are not able to see a particular sound, okay, you will know where is this sound coming from or what exactly is causing the sound. If you have seen it by sight, you have remembered it, that is stored in your memory. Smell of a certain amount of food. So just as we saw with even closed eyes, we can at times recognize what type of food is being cooked. Okay, tongue. Okay, so even if you have closed eyes and if you are tasting a food, okay, by tasting the food itself, so if your eyes are closed and let's say somebody induces or you happen to get a sugar crystal inside you, you will quickly realize that it is sugar which is getting inside your mouth. Okay, so these are things. Why? Because these are things which are already stored in our memory. So as I said, these sensations are going hand in hand along with the memory that we have acquired. Okay, so they store information and experiences that we have, and this information is received from sensory areas like these. Okay, and then the motor areas come in picture. Okay, so you can take a snapshot of the same. Okay, so some more aspects on the on the voluntary actions. Okay, so all the voluntary actions of the body. Now we will study what does the cerebrum does. Okay, what is the function of the cerebrum in the brain. So all the voluntary actions, okay, which are performed by our conscious will, wherein there is a direct involvement of our own will, all these actions of the body are initiated by the cerebrum. The cerebrum is a part of the brain which actually controls all the voluntary actions. Okay, so cerebrum receives the sensory information. Now sensory information from different parts of the body, sense of touch, sense of smell, sense of sight, sense of hearing, all these are basically sensory informations. So from different receptors it receives the sensory information and it interprets the information. It interprets the information, which means that in light of previous experiences, whatever previous experiences were there, in light of those previous experiences, it interprets this information and it takes a decision. Okay, so it is not taking a decision just by its own. Okay, as I said, here there is a involvement of the thinking process, which means that there is an involvement of the memory that is stored from the various experiences that we had. Okay, so there is, whenever we have an experience from our sensory receptors, whether it is an experience of sight, or whether it is an experience of hearing, or whether it is an experience of touch or taste or smell, whatever, okay, these are stored as memory. Okay, so the cerebrum receives the sensory information from different receptors. It interprets the information in the light of previous experiences and it takes a decision which it thinks is right. For example, a very common example is, let's say you are solving a problem in mathematics. Now let's say the problem can be either of trigonometry or maybe any of your chapters. Now we know that in trigonometry there are different formulas: sine theta, cos theta, tan theta. There are different identities: sine square theta plus cos square theta is equal to 1. So you have got a sum. Okay, now what will happen is, when you're trying to solve that sum, all these experiences, the past experiences that you had, will come across and your brain will coordinate to find the best answer. Okay, that of course depends upon your practice. So that's the reason we see, the more you practice, the more is the experience that you gain. See, we keep on saying that practice mathematics, practice science as much as you can. So this increases your mastery over the subject. Why? Because your experiences with the subject increase. The more you practice, the more your brain gets used to it. Just by looking at the sum, your brain can actually coordinate which formula to go into and how to decode this entire sum. Okay, that's what is happening here in the light of previous experiences. So more are the previous experiences, the more appropriate or the more right will be the action that will be generated, which is basically solving the problem. Okay, so that's how, see, we keep on, you have seen elders keep on saying that read more, practice more or study more. The reason why they are constantly insisting on you doing so is because it increases your experiences with academics, and when it increases your experience, it improves your thought process. When you get a problem, you are able to solve it easily if your experiences are intact. See, just by looking at, we are not that, our memory is not that sharp, but just looking at a problem once, we will remember it for our lives. It doesn't happen until unless we are superhuman beings. Okay, so there are experiences in every chapter. You will find 10 or 15 problems. Why are these problems there? There is an education board that decides that these number of problems should be there to give you an experience of that particular chapter or topic or subject. The reason why you are supposed to attempt those questions is because it increases the amount of time that you spend with those problems, and this enhances and enriches your experience, which becomes a deciding factor to make the right decision. Okay, so all these experiences that you had from the past, see, if you are, and I'm giving an example, let's say trigonometry is a chapter in mathematics, you have just seen that chapter. Okay, these are formulas, these are identities, and you try and do a problem, and on the other hand, or you appear for a test. Okay, on the other hand, you have seen the chapter, you have understood the concepts, and you have attempted at least 50 problems from that chapter on a daily basis or whatever, whenever you got the time. Now you attempt the test. So where do you think will you get more marks? Your brain has equipped to take the right decisions here because you had enhanced your previous experiences. In the second case, you have had enough of practice for that particular chapter, which has enhanced your knowledge. By solving more and more problems in that particular chapter, you are equipped to handle the problems better. Okay, so in this case, depending on your past experiences, your brain will take the right decision, which is basically solving the problem. Okay, so that's how the complexity of the decision making is. Okay, so what it does is it sends out instructions to the motor area, which are basically our hand, our feet, whichever body organ is involved in solving that. Okay, so which controls the movement of voluntary muscles, and it happens with not only in academics, it happens in sports as well. You see any sports person and you happen to consider their life, they've spent at least 7 to 8 hours in practice every day. Practice is something that they will have to encounter every day. You think that Virat Kohli doesn't know how to bat? Okay, if he is given the bat after a year, he will not know how to use it. He will, but still he keeps on practicing. That's what enhances the experiences. It's not only about academics, it's about anything in which you want to excel. So the more and more you increase your experiences, the more and more your brain is comfortably able to correlate with whatever experiences you have and take the right decision. For example, if it's a bouncer, he needs to hook the ball. Okay, so where and how will he do that until unless he has had enough of practice? All of a sudden you put him in front of a dangerous bowler, and he will go topsy-turvy, right? So these are sensations which we had experiences in the past, and when we have those experiences, we can interpret them effectively if we had enough of practice with them. Okay, so these voluntary muscles move for appropriate response. So he knows how to deal with a bouncer. Okay, so he will hook the ball and he will hook it so well that it crosses the boundary, it doesn't get caught by a fielder. So these are responses that are there. He had enough of practice with bouncers. He must have practiced with enough of bouncers to when he's playing a match, he can execute that efficiently. Okay, so accordingly, when he sees the bouncer coming in, his brain makes a decision, and the decision is passed on to his hands, feet, entire body. The entire body adjusts itself in swinging it wherever he wants to swing it off. Okay, and that goes for a 6 or 4, whatever. Okay, and that is basically an appropriate response. Okay, so this is all on the past experiences that he had. All right, so we will not talk. So cerebrum, you see, has a lot of activities to do with thinking, with rational, with past experiences, with memory. Okay, so there is a lot of thought process behind your actions. Okay, a reflex action is not generated by a cerebrum. An action which involves thinking is generated by a cerebrum. Okay, so functions of the midbrain, not much here, but it controls reflex movements of head, neck and trunk in response to auditory and visual stimuli. Okay, so auditory stimuli, for example, you are walking across the street, or maybe you are driving, or maybe you are on a bicycle, and you are not able to see a vehicle which is coming back. Maybe you are not using your side mirrors to see it effectively, but the moment the vehicle from behind honks, okay, you are aware that there is a vehicle and I need to give it a passage. Okay, so you will put yourself aside, or you will give a passage for the vehicle to go up. So that is basically an auditory stimuli. Why? Because it is something that is you are gaining from your past experiences. A vehicle will honk only when it is not getting enough of passage in the road to pass across. So you have to get a little sideways in order for the vehicle to allow to go ahead. Okay, so that is an auditory stimuli. Visual stimulus, okay, as we have discussed this earlier, our pupils tend to contract. Okay, the pupil part of our eye tends to contract when there is too much of light, because too much of light entering all at once in our eyes can damage eye cells. Okay, so it contracts because the iris muscles get contracted, and this is a visual stimulus that is generated. Okay, in the same way, in a dark room, the pupil enlarges, again a visual stimulus that is generated. So these are basically reflex movements that are happening within the head, neck and trunk. Okay, within the head, neck and trunk, and these visual stimuluses are basically stimuluses which are again generated by past experience. For example, there is a bouncer that is coming in, and it might hit me, so I will move my head. Okay, you have seen batsmen moving their head from a very dangerous bouncer, because that might hit them and cause an injury. They know what a ball will do when it hits you. Okay, and that too with so much of speed. So your head and trunk moves accordingly. So these are stimuluses which are generated by the midbrain. See, to be very honest, we are still not very much clear about the functioning of the brain. Whatever we are depicting here is just some scientific studies that have been made, but we cannot say that okay, I can enhance my memory actions like this or something like that. So there are certain things which are still yet to be decoded on the brain and the spinal cord part. But generally, these are the things that are associated. So whatever we are studying in terms of control and coordination are general things that are there. There might be more complicated things which are involved, which we have not gone deep into, or maybe in higher classes we will go deep into it. But these are certain things. A neurosurgeon, a person who actually does surgeries on nerves or maybe brain or the spinal cord, cannot actually complete an operation before 6 to 7 hours. That's the minimum amount of time that a neurosurgeon takes in order to operate on a patient. Okay, so that's how complicated things are. So whatever we are studying is just a part of it. Okay, whatever we have been able to decode so far, there are things which are still which still remain in the dark, and which we are still not able to decode about the human brain and its functioning. Okay, so whatever we can decode, we can have a strong grip on it and study it. Okay, so that we can enhance our knowledge. And as I said, the more you experience, the more enhancing or enriching your experience becomes, the more knowledgeable you are, and the more better you are in a position to decode problems. Okay, so I hope this makes it clear. We will now move on to the hindbrain and its parts, the pons, the medulla, and the cerebellum. These are the things that we will discuss now. So you can take a snapshot of the same. Okay, so we will now move on. So we have seen the functions of the forebrain, we have seen the functions of the midbrain as well. Now we will talk about the functions of the hindbrain. Okay, so the functions and the parts of hindbrain. Hindbrain, we have seen that the hindbrain is made up of pons, it is made up of the medulla, okay, and it is made up of the cerebellum. Okay, cerebellum and cerebrum are different things, although they almost spell the same and have almost the same pronunciations, but they are different. Cerebrum is located in the forebrain and is involved more with thinking, logic, reasoning, okay, and decoding information, storing information, memory, and all that stuff. Cerebellum has a different aspects which is located in the hindbrain. Okay, so we have the pons, the cerebellum, and the medulla, which make up the hindbrain. So what are the different functionalities of these things? So pons, they take part in regulating respiration. Okay, the respiration is regulated by pons. See, if you are running or if you are doing heavy exercise, your respiration increases, the rate of your breathing increases. Why? Because your body at this point of time needs more energy. Okay, so you need more oxygen. Okay, so that's how it increases. Okay, for example, if you are underwater, your breathing system will accordingly respond. If you are sitting relaxed in a calm position, then your breathing system will be a little different. Okay, your breathing rate will reduce. If you are sleeping, your breathing rate becomes all the more slow. Okay, because now the energy requirements of your bodies has reduced. Now it's only the internal parts which require the energy, as against when you are awake and your external parts require the energy. Okay, so the breathing system is entirely controlled by the pons. Okay, and we need to change our breathing rate as per the circumstances. When we are running, when we are playing, when we are under a certain danger, when we are in the requirement of moving very fast. Okay, all these things are requiring different amount of energies, and since energy is associated with the intake of oxygen, which is basically a necessity for respiration process to take place, so our oxygen intake or the rate at which we intake oxygen increases or decreases accordingly. Okay, so that's what pons basically regulate the respiration. Then we have the cerebellum. What does the cerebellum do? It helps in maintaining posture and balance of the body. So this is the cerebellum. I am standing right now, it is maintaining my posture. I am sitting right now, it is maintaining my posture. So cerebellum helps in maintaining posture and balance of the body. It enables us to make precise and accurate movements. It enables us to make precise and accurate movements. If I need to run, if I need to stop, if I need to stand, all these are precise and accurate movements. Coordinates smooth body movements like walking, dancing, cycling, writing, etc. These are the smooth body movements that are coordinated. Okay, smooth body movements like walking, dancing, cycling, writing, etc. These are smooth body movements that are controlled by the cerebellum part. Okay, so cerebellum is basically more into balancing the body. Okay, the function of the cerebellum is enhanced as man ages. Okay, for example, if you see a small baby, okay, she cannot walk or she cannot run as you can. So slowly and steadily she learns how to walk and then how to run. So all this while the cerebellum is getting developed. Cerebellum is getting developed, because of which it imparts balance to the body. The cerebellum weakens its function when the man or the person goes very old. You've seen lean and thin people, they almost tremble when they walk. Okay, so this function basically goes down. Okay, so cerebellum is more concerned with maintaining the body balance and posture when you are standing, when you are involved in certain amount of in certain sports. Okay, for example, swimming is a very natural thing, and maintaining the body posture during swimming, or maybe playing cricket, okay, walking, dancing, cycling, even writing. See, when we write, we need to have the pen hold it in a particular way. We cannot write like this, right? There is a certain requirement of the pen to be holded in a certain way. So these are maintaining different postures while performing different activities, and that's what maintains the balance. Okay, while performing different activities, we need to maintain a different posture, and this is what imparts the body posture. It imparts balance to the body. Okay, medulla controls involuntary actions on which we do not have a direct control. For example, even when we are sleeping, or even we are not engaged in some very rigorous activities, our heart is beating. So heartbeat controls what? The blood circulation. Okay, so the medulla part, basically the medulla part controls the blood circulation. This controls the blood circulation. Okay, it's the heartbeat. The blood pressure, which is very important. See, there is a certain amount of pressure that needs to be maintained. Why? Because our arteries can handle only a certain amount of pressure. If the pressure increases, they might explode. It's like a pipe. Okay, it's like a pipe. Every pipe is designed in such a way that it can handle the passage of fluid up to a certain amount of pressure. If the pressure increases, the pipe will explode. Okay, so that's what arteries are for. Okay, so arteries are basically for this pressure. So the blood pressure needs to be maintained. If the blood pressure is not maintained, then we might lose our arteries and veins as well. Okay, so the blood pressure is maintained how? By the heartbeat, because the heart is the one which kind of contracts and pushes the blood. If it contracts more than normal, then then there might be a risk. So there are things which we need to control. Okay, so blood pressure, peristaltic movement of alimentary canal. Peristaltic movement of alimentary canal, see, when we engulf food, okay, so the food doesn't just go directly to the stomach. Okay, it goes very slowly. So there will be a contraction and there will be an expansion. So the oesophagus, which is there, the food goes like this. Okay, contraction and then again expansion, contraction and then expansion. So there is a time that needs to be spent by the food in the oesophagus before it actually enters the main digestive system, that is stomach. Okay, so this contraction and expansion which pushes the food into the through the alimentary canal. Okay, and this is just not limited to the oesophagus, it is limited to the entire, because the food passes through different levels while it is digested. It goes into the stomach, it crosses the small intestine, duodenum and all that stuff, and large intestine. All these places the food is passing through. Okay, so the food is passing through all the places. How will it move? Food is not a living thing that will decide its own course. It has to be pushed, and this pushing effect is known as peristaltic movement, and this happens by certain muscles, and these muscles are controlled by the medulla. Okay, so all these are, see, once you engulf the food, everything is out of control. There is no conscious movement. You cannot put your hand inside to let it land in the stomach and then go through small intestine and all. It all happens on its own. The food goes forward, whether you are sleeping, whether you are standing, whether you are sitting, the food actually gets pushed forward in a peristaltic movement, and this peristaltic movement is basically constant contraction and expansion. So the contraction happens, it gets pushed forward, and then the expansion happens to let it come. Again it contracts, expands, and so on and so forth. That is a constant effect that happens, and that is called the peristaltic movement, and that is getting aided by medulla. Most of all these involuntary actions are controlled by medulla. Okay, blood pressure and peristaltic movement of the alimentary canal. Also control center for reflex actions like swallowing. you cannot eat water, you have to swallow it. Okay, once you are through with chewing the food in your mouth, you will have to swallow it. Okay, so swallowing is a action that is generated again by medulla. Okay, that's also an involuntary action, not under your direct control. So it's not like that, like you are chewing your food, okay, now it is time for me to swallow. It doesn't happen that way. Once you have chewed your food, automatically it gets swallowed up. Okay, so swallowing water, okay, swallowing food, that's like that. Coughing, okay, so coughing is also an involuntary action. Why do you cough? Because something is stuck there in your windpipe that might choke you. Okay, it has to be expelled out. Okay, so we should never stop coughing. At times, you know, you are maybe in a forum in which coughing is not taken into, but these are automatic bio responses, and this should always be handled. Even if you are in a class, or if you are in a public forum where maybe coughing might disturb others, you will have to excuse yourself and maybe move on to another location, or maybe just cough it out, because it's very important that this thing is there's something that is choked in your windpipe that needs to be coughed out. Okay, so coughing is one thing. Sneezing, see, generally we sneeze when we have caught cold, but at times we sneeze when there's something again stuck in our windpipe. This entire system is connected in such a way. For example, there is a saying that goes that don't talk when you are consuming food, and there is a reason why it happens, because the food pipe and the windpipe have a common opening. The food pipe and the windpipe have a common opening, and at times what happens, the food, instead of entering the alimentary canal, it gets into the windpipe. When you are talking, see, when you are talking, you are pushing air. What happens is, this is a junction. Okay, so let's say this is the windpipe, this is the food pipe, and this is the windpipe. The food is coming from here, and at the same time you are trying to talk. So what will happen, the food should land here, but because you are pushing air, the lighter particles of the food might enter, and that might choke you. Okay, because windpipe is not meant for food digestion. Okay, it is just meant for you to breathe, it is meant for you to talk. Okay, so at times this food gets pushed up in there, and that's when you sneeze. When you see people, while eating food, they try to talk, they get this sneezing. Okay, and at times I have seen that food particle coming out of your nose. Okay, maybe a chapati ka tukda or some food element that just comes out of your nose. Okay, so this happens, and that is very important. These are automatic. So you don't decide on these things. Okay, oh, okay, so something is stuck in my windpipe, now I need to sneeze. No, it will just happen automatically. Okay, it has to go out from the windpipe system. Okay, so that's called sneezing, that happens. Okay, generally we sneeze when we have caught cold. Obviously a lot of mucus gets blocked in the windpipe, and that has to be expelled out. So that's when we sneeze, and that's when the mucus comes out. Okay, secretion of saliva. Okay, again, saliva is the first enzyme of our body which encounters the food, or which helps in the digestion process. So until unless appropriate amount of saliva is generated in our mouth, the entire chewing process also is not going to help. We will not be able to swallow the food until unless enough amount of saliva is generated in our body. Okay, so the saliva is very important. Again, vomiting is something which we need to take care of. So vomiting, see, why would we vomit? Okay, at times what happens is there's too much of gas that is produced in our stomach, and that has increased the pressure, because of which whatever food we have taken in is just there in the esophagus, and that is not able to land up in the stomach. Okay, for digestion. Somehow our digestion process has gone topsy-turvy, or maybe we are not in a position to digest food as we normally do. So in that case, the food, whatever we have engulfed in, it remains in the esophagus, and if it is there for a long time, what will happen? What will happen is, the esophagus is made up of soft tissues. The food will have an impact on esophagus. So we cannot afford the food to lie in there in the esophagus for a very long time, and that's when the puking sensation happens. That's when the body throws it out. Okay, that's called vomiting. Okay, we should not again stop vomiting. These are things that we should never stop. Sneezing, coughing, vomiting, we should never stop these things. Okay, however irritating they might be, these are certain biological responses that are generated, and they are very essential to be executed the way they are. They should not be stopped for any reasons whatsoever. Okay, we should be obviously when we are sneezing or when you are coughing, you should cover your mouth. Obviously we are living in times when we are using these face masks and all, so that if in case the sneezing is not for anything natural but for any virus that might be infecting others, that's something hygienic, that's something that we need to take care of. Okay, so that we are not spreading any disease which has gone inside our body. Okay, so that's for spreading the disease, but these are biological process, they should never be stopped. Swallowing, coughing, sneezing, so coughing, sneezing, even vomiting, they should never be stopped. Okay, so these are certain aspects. We have almost learned whatever the functions of the brain are. So this more or less covers the entire topic on the brain, that for the time being is in your syllabus. Okay, and you can actually have a snapshot of the same. You can refer to different books as well. In case you have any questions in which you need more clarity, feel free to post your comments and ask me personally as well. I will be more than happy to cover it in the future slides. From here on, we will talk about the spinal cord, which is still left. Okay, so this covers the brain and its functioning. From the next slide onwards, we will talk about the spinal cord and its functions. Okay, you can take a snapshot of the same. Okay, so we are going to continue with, so we have understood the various parts of the brain, their functions involved. Now we'll move on to the spinal cord. So as we see, spinal cord is just an extension of the brain. Okay, so that the responses can be generated quicker. Okay, see, if I get a prick on my toes, till the time the action goes, or rather the response from the receptor skin goes to the brain, it might be late. So that's the reason spinal cord is there, so that the distance that is covered is not that long. I'm sorry. And an immediate response can be generated. Okay, so spinal cord is basically a cylindrical structure, and it starts in continuation with the medulla and extends downwards. So here we have the medulla, and there the extension continues. Okay, that's the reason it is said that never hit anyone out here, because that's the part which is not inside the vertebral column, and by hitting someone here with very high amount of force can actually cause death. Okay, so the spinal cord, it's an extension of the medulla, because this part is neither protected by the skull nor by the vertebral column. So the medulla part extends and forms the spinal cord, which extends downwards. Okay, so spinal cord is a cylindrical structure. It is like a cylinder. Okay, like this, it extends like this. This is like a cylindrical structure. It starts in continuation with the medulla and extends downwards. Okay, it is enclosed in a bony cage, just as we have the brain, which is enclosed inside the skull, because it's a very delicate organ. Okay, it has to control and coordinate all the functions in our body. Similarly, the spinal cord is also enclosed in the vertebral column and is surrounded by meninges. So if you see, the meninges is basically a common surrounding that surrounds the brain and the spinal cord as well. Okay, so it will contain the cerebrospinal fluid, the CSF. We have already learned this in the previous slide. It will contain the cerebrospinal fluid. So there are 31 pairs of nerves approximately which rise from the spinal cord to the different parts of the body, to our hands, feet and all. So there are 31 pairs of nerves. So imagine the complexity. The spinal cord is automatically controlling all the activities that a body is performing. Spinal reflex actions and conduction. So what is basically the function of the spinal cord? It controls the spinal reflex actions. We have already understood how reflex actions are performed. Okay, and the conduction of the nerve impulses to and from the brain. So certain actions have to be regulated by the brain. So that's something also controlled and facilitated by the spinal cord as well. Okay, so it has a very important function to perform, especially in the reflex actions. The spinal cord has a major function to perform. A major organ of all the reflexes that are generated are performed by the spinal cord. Okay, so what are the functions of the brain? The functions of the brain: it receives information carrying nerve impulses from all sensory organs of the body. So it basically receives information carrying nerve impulses from all the sensory organs of the body. The second part is that it responds to impulses brought in by sensory organs by sending its own instructions through motor nerves. okay, by sending its own instructions through motor nerves. So first of all, the brain receives information carrying nerve impulses from all sensory organs of the body, our eyes, our ears, our nose, our tongue, our skin, all these are basically sensory organs. So it receives impulses from all the sensory organs of the body. Now it responds to the impulses which are brought in, all these impulses which are brought in by the sensory organs by sending its own instructions through motor nerves. So these motor nerves carry the instructions of the brain to the concerned muscles, okay, to the muscles and glands, carrying them to function accordingly, causing them to function accordingly. So this is what causes them to function accordingly. All these are carried to the different effector organs so that they can function accordingly, okay. Correlates to various stimuli from different sense organs. It correlates to various stimuli that is generated from different sense organs and produces the most intelligent and appropriate response. So the brain gets involved in generating responses which will basically involve thinking, okay. So intelligent thinking and the most appropriate response. As I gave an example in the earlier slide, that you have a hot plate all of a sudden in your hands which contains food, you can drop that, okay, but dropping that will cause a loss to the plate which will break, and the food as well, it will become unconsumable. So what you do is quickly you find a place which is very nearby and keep it there so that the food remains intact and your hands also remain intact. So that's an appropriate and intelligent decision, okay. So the brain basically functions to generate these intelligent and appropriate responses. It coordinates body activities so that mechanisms, chemical reactions work together, so that all the mechanisms and chemical reactions work together, okay. It also stores information from the previous experiences, which is very important, okay. For us to behave in the most appropriate and intelligent way, we have to store information. So I know if I drop the plate, my mom is going to scold me, okay. So I will rather keep it in a place which will ensure that my hands are not getting burned, the plate is not getting broken into pieces, and the food is not getting destroyed as well. So that's the intelligent response, okay. So why am I able to generate this intelligent response? Because somewhere it is stored in my mind that these losses are losses which need and which can be covered by my action, okay. So stores information so that the behavior can be modified by past experiences. So whatever past experiences we had when mom had scolded you for dropping things, so those experiences are stored in the brain. So we are not only aware of the danger of burning of our hands, but we are also aware of the danger caused by the scolding of my mom, okay. So that's how the appropriate response is generated. That's how the brain thinks rationally. So not only in terms of danger, but also in terms of all other experiences, we generate an appropriate response, okay. For example, if I'm walking, or rather in my room, all my doors and windows are opened up, and somehow somebody is burning something, some wastage or garbage is getting burned, because of which a lot of smoke is coming inside. So I will quickly close all the doors and windows, okay. So that's an appropriate response that is generated, okay. Clear? So this is basically the function of the brain, and this is all that is neural control. Now we will move on to the endocrine system, okay, which is also the hormonal control. So the brain and the spinal cord, they are controlling the entire coordination by means of nerves, the impulses, the responses, okay. Some are voluntary, some are involuntary. So all these are basically a package. Now we will move on to a different way of controlling, that is the chemical control. This control by the brain, the spinal cord, the nerves, all these are basically having one thing in common, which is electrical impulses. So these are quick responses, okay. Electrical impulses, we know electricity is very fast, so these electrical impulses are very fast. These are quick responses. So wherein activities which require quick responses are actually controlled and coordinated primarily by the brain and the spinal cord. However, there are certain other activities which are also a kind of response to the stimuli, which are chemical responses, and that's when hormones come in place, and that's the study of the endocrine system. So we will go into the endocrine system post this. You can have a snapshot of the same.